This is the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of MetricsCart. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of MetricsCart. I'm your host, Shrestha, and today we have Dr. James Richardson joining us. He's the founder of Premium Growth Solutions. He's also the author of Ramping Your Brand, which a lot of you might already be familiar with. He has his own podcast called The Startup Foundation. A very hearty welcome to you, James.
Thanks for having me, Shrestha. Nice to be here.
Yeah. So to get started, your background as a cultural anthropologist, and then you diving deep into market research, and later specializing more into consumer packaged goods is so fascinating. Tell me more about how did that happen from one point to the other to CPG?
Well, there aren't a lot of academic jobs in cultural anthropology. That was kind of forced on me. And I found my way to market research because I still enjoy interviewing people, looking at behavior patterns. And especially, I think what helped me in my current work is getting more clarity on the difference between what American consumers talk about versus what they actually keep buying. So and you can't scale a business without repeat purchase in consumer packaged goods unless you have a lot of money and you're willing to throw it away, which means you're probably Nestle and Pepsi. So,
Right.
so some of what I was trained to do in graduate school comes in handy just because I don't tend to make a lot of assumptions that people make
Yeah.
about human behavior. It's very hard to change people.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of social pressure to make that happen. So, I think I came into the industry a little more humble than your average marketer, who's like, they overestimate their ability to influence people.
Right.
And founders do that too because they're really excited.
Yeah.
So that I did market research full time for a few years, but then I got into consulting and worked with a bunch of leading food and beverage companies in the U.S. They're all Fortune 100 companies. They're heads of strategy and innovation and at the time we were looking at early stage companies, which are to them tiny. And I think for those who aren't familiar with early stage food, beverage, personal care companies, they don't make any money. So very few of them do. The faster they're growing, the less money they tend to make because they're reinvesting everything into the growth. None of this makes sense. In a big holding company, you don't spend all of your profit and put it back into growth because you'll be fired. So the profit goes to shareholders. So, I think what we were uncovering for them, we were learning along with them, was the different strategic thinking sort of hat you need to have on to grow a early stage brand. And, at the time, I think big companies were making this is the 2010s. A lot of people were making big bets. Coca-Cola had a ventures division that was investing in $5 million companies. They don't do this anymore. So, everyone was kind of stumbling around trying to figure out what was going on because there's just so much growth in the U.S. early stage at that time. Everyone wanted a piece of it. And during that time, I worked with a couple companies with a little consulting team I had, and that's where the initial insights for ramping your brand better in the introduction came from, was a bunch of data science work we did for big companies. And it's the kind of thing only they would fund.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't afford. It was like $75,000 worth of raw data just to start. So obviously I can't do that sitting in my shed. So that was a unique privilege. And we learned some things about growth, how it was happening. And I talk in the book about the counterintuitive findings. I think which are still true, and they're very important for people because especially if you're in the US, a little less so, I think, if you're an entrepreneur in India.
Mhm.
In the US, you're going to be surrounded on the internet and up in your face at events with all these, big
Yeah.
multinational alumni. They're everywhere. Like you could probably avoid that easier in India.
True.
So that actually gives you cognitive freedom. You're not being biased by
Definitely. Yeah.
the logics of large companies and how they launch a business.
Yeah.
So that was the big, thing that came out of my work for big companies that is in the book, which sort of here's the different rules that you need to use if you want to survive because you have no money or you have very little. You don't have much credibility.
Yeah.
You don't have connections.
Yeah.
It's like the story is like everything's pointing to your product.
Yeah.
It's like got to
Yeah.
be killer.
Yeah.
And then you got to be really high energy.
Yeah.
But
There's too much to do.
yeah. Now I've noticed with Indian entrepreneurs, the high energy is like the least of your problems. And I've lived there too. It's a very entrepreneurial culture.
Yeah.
Um, it always has been, I think, sometimes out of desperation as much as a good business plan. But India has the raw energy necessary for all of this. I think the challenge is uh, understanding basic human behavior, which is cross-cultural, I think, which
Yeah.
people don't wake up in India or America wondering whether they, God, am I missing out on an interesting new brand? I mean, that's like only a trend consultant wakes up there.
Very true.
Everyone's out just trying to they're just trying to buy the things that they already know they like.
Yeah.
So you have this huge burden as an entrepreneur anywhere in the world, which is you've got to make a case. And man, no one's going to give you any time to make that case.
Very right.
If you're my teenage kids, it's operating at the speed of TikTok,
Yeah.
They 2 to 3 seconds and then they're on to the next video.
Very true. So many of the CPG entrepreneurs, one of the challenges that they face early on is with the product design. And I feel it's about creating that experience. It's about creating that lingering presence at a time when our content consumption levels are so high as consumers. And so could you tell a little bit about how the role of product design plays in overcoming these kind of challenges?
I think the thing that successful founders get accidentally or deliberately is that they're really obsessed with their core category.
Yep.
And so if you're going to design something that takes off without a lot of marketing and promotional support,
Right.
which you kind of need
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
you need that extra, investors call it tailwind. But if you obsess on your category and can figure out, is my category not offering a really popular outcome? And some of this is cultural.
Yeah.
So obviously my book is weighted towards U.S. sort of consumer culture, but you can do the same you can deploy the same logic in any market in the world. And if you can design something that will bring a new outcome into a category, and this is what many high growth businesses without a marketing team have done, right? So in the U.S., Chobani did this by bringing in high protein, high fat yogurt into the yogurt case. And it creates this thing called satiety. It actually tells your brain that you ate something, right? So, and traditional yogurt in the United States, not in Europe, but in the United States and France, is like watery sort of,
Yeah.
it's like a health thing. You don't actually try to fill up on it. But if you go to Greece, they're filling up on yogurt.
Yeah.
Like it's a meal. so,
Yeah.
so that was the innovation. I mean, really simple.
That plays out.
Yeah, really simple, right? So in Greece, this mainstream thing, you bring it to European yogurt market. It's now a new outcome in the category. And if you can, even if you didn't design it that way, if you can figure that out,
Yeah.
that changes your whole marketing approach. It especially changes what you put on your package.
Yeah. And I think a lot of brands are kind of breaking out from the shell, how legacy brands have done before,
Right.
have such very interesting designs like Dr. Swatch. So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, So design, there's so many layers. I think the one that most founders, and honestly, big companies that don't want to take any risks, obsess on is, well, let's just change the graphics. Let's just change the brand identity, tweak the colors, move some stuff around. That's notorious, sort of lazy design changes. Now, sometimes it's really important.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, a lot of entrepreneurs without experience in the industry don't understand some basics about package design for a physical shelf space.
Yeah.
Or even for a digital one. But I got to be honest, physical retail shelving, package design is much harder. It's
Yeah.
much easier to screw it up because if you sit on your computer, right, and you stare, you're looking at your designer's thing. You sit in you blow it up on your monitor. You have that's not a realistic view of your package, right? As if you were walking through a store with a basket, because you're going to see the package from 15 feet away first.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't grab your eye, now you've got to hope that while that shopper is browsing the category and they're honestly looking for something else, right? The one they already buy.
Yeah.
That they're going to somehow notice you. So you can't actually make any newbie mistakes. You can't have a tiny trademark.
Yeah.
Your symbol, you have to be clutter free. You have to have one or two symbols. Really helps to have a special package structure, they call it, which is a shape. But that's often trust of something that people cannot afford in the beginning. Like if you call up a package, so I want to custom design something, they'll probably laugh because they know you don't have the money.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that you might be able to do later as an entrepreneur. But often you're just playing with color, symbolism, graphic design elements. And so you actually can't make any mistakes.
Right.
Right. And then on top of that, you have to have, hopefully, a very clear, compelling, attractive, unconscious signaling of what is the food, what is the thing I'm selling, and what is the outcome I'm going to deliver.
Yeah.
And that's done when it's nutritional. It's all about the attribute.
Yeah.
Right.
Has
So
to stand out.
right, you could call it a feature or whatever you want to do in tech, but it's basically the attributes are what unconsciously connect to the outcome, right? So if I say no added sugar, and that's my key symbol, I'm cueing weight control, right?
Yeah.
Now, that means something different if it's in an adult yogurt section versus in like the kid yogurt section.
Exactly. Yeah.
Different audiences, different meanings.
It's just like the minute details that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's very tiny changes can really shift the impact a lot.
A lot.
And I think a founder doesn't want to accept that. I know, people who are really new, they don't want to accept that a tiny little mistake could be that disastrous because so much else they're dealing with.
Is it more of lack of time, and there's a lot of unraveling and deep work that needs to be done that they kind of miss out on these aspects?
My experience, again, it's with U.S. entrepreneurs. My experience is that especially the American founder, they're into product development to a point. They're way too subjective about that.
Yeah.
So if they happen to be lucky and their immediate niche audience that's going to build the business happens to be them, like they're in that audience, they're lucky.
Yeah.
If they're outside of that audience, there's going to be a problem, right? So, and you will see this. You can see this in culinary innovations that just they're not ready for prime time.
Yeah.
So I've seen that before in condiments and sauces. It's easy to wake up and say, I want to have a great hot sauce brand, but actually not truly be disciplined enough to nail it.
Yeah.
In the execution. It's not uncommon. So, that's just one example. So I think people are trying. I think they are trying to get product to finish so they can get inventory, so they can get cash in the door. None of that's bad, but I think people could do a little more prototype testing in a very, not in a super scientific way,
Yeah.
up front, to make sure they're not, to make sure that they're not totally off base, especially, and this is my big concern, is the sensory experience. Like if you've got anything that goes on the body, or we eat it, or we smell it, I mean, pick a target audience that you think you want, that you think should be interested in this, and get it in front of them, and they need to be strangers.
Right.
Right, so the best place to go is some kind of an event. And don't jump on them and down, tell everyone that you're the founder, because then they won't be honest.
Oh, yeah. I think it's always a matter of how bias creeps into our conversations or, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be bias
Yeah.
with a founder, but I think you can mitigate that a little bit by doing some kind of sensory test up front, a mini focus group in
Definitely.
your audience. And at least you'll know if it's a disaster. Now, you're not going to know if you've nailed it until I don't think you will until you get into the market with finished packaging, pricing in a real context. And even if it's online, same thing. You got to get out there and start selling the product. And that's where, that's where digital commerce continues to play a role in, if it's not your number one volume channel, and maybe it is, but even if it isn't, it's really valuable as a market, as a consumer research, sort of fan research laboratory. So, and I push this with my clients all the time. And I talk about it in the book too, which is that, if you have some kind of flow, whether it's direct to consumer, preferably direct to consumers, because you can control all the data and you're getting the emails. So now you have a communications pipe as well,
Right.
where you know what they bought, the frequency, some basic things, and you can go and literally start doing. I mean, I tell people, hey, just call up some random repeat purchasers and just ask them some basic questions. Like why?
Right.
Why do you keep buying it? Now that sounds like a really dumb question, right? If you're a founder, it's like, of course, why do you keep buying? Because it's the most amazing thing ever. That's but you have to be open to the fact that your why for starting the company is not the why that's
The consumer shops.
back. Yeah. And it's often not.
Yeah.
And the less, honestly, the more, I mean, there was no one more surprised that Skinny Pop low calorie popcorn exploded than the founders. They didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
They thought they thought they were just pleasing some weirdos at their store with a diet popcorn.
Mm.
They totally didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
That's how off you can be. so,
Definitely.
so now in their case, the velocity sort of smacked them in the head. They didn't have to do market research. Most people are going to be in a situation where, they're not performing well, and they're going
Yeah.
to wonder why. And that's when you don't want to mess with your product until you've gotten it out to people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And not the people who hate you, but the people who are still buying you,
Exactly.
even though your business isn't performing. Find out what they're discovering.
Yeah.
That's actually going to be the key, because there could be something about your package that's
Yeah.
totally like they may have seen through your bad packaging. Happens all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
My favorite it's a little tired now, but my favorite example is people who used to just plaster gluten-free and big letters like on the front of a panel, and they would
Yeah.
attract all these gluten-free shops, right? And they would lose some people. They would lose a lot of people
Yeah.
because gluten-free signals bad taste, especially in food. So, but
Mm.
then there was all these other people who would just ignore that,
Yeah.
find something else going on that was cool about the product, and they would just ignore the package.
Yeah. And these are sort of the much less talked about aspects about designing.
Yeah, I mean, the best package designers want consumer insights from your consumers. The challenge is that in the early stage, most brand owners don't have any.
Yeah.
They have fallen for a fallacy that I've written about. I'll be writing about Frank Magazine in a couple of weeks. The fallacy that you need to be a big business to do consumer research. um, and it's been promoted by large market research firms because there are very expensive national panel survey methodologies require that you have a big brand because otherwise they can't find you in their panel. That is a methodological problem of panel providers. That's not your problem.
Yeah.
So I coach people that, just like I said, dump your repeat purchasers on D2C into an Excel, put in a column, assign random numbers. Now select 8, call them.
Yeah. Very interesting.
It's not rocket science.
So following to what you said, I have this question. So what is your perspective of a new CPG brand that is kind of diversifying into a different category? Suppose it launched as a beauty brand and then now suddenly selling matchas. So how does the product design and, kind of getting that consumer's attention play there?
You're talking about starting one category and moving to another.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally pretty risky unless there's a really tight symbolic connection.
Yeah.
Right. So if you start in wet baby food and you want to go into dry baby food, they're going to be in different aisles.
Yeah.
It's a bit radical. They're different buyers potentially.
Yeah.
But it still makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you're selling ice cream or gelato in a
like
standard packaging, but then you want to go and sell a novel like a frozen bar, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hate to say it, but you don't really need a scientist to tell you whether it's stupid or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's intuitively in what they call an adjacent category, and when it feels intuitively right, that means that consumers in your home culture will also they will feel that too at the shelf. Where people get weird is actually what's been happening in plant-based meat, right?
Yeah.
Because they get so obsessed with their R&D in some magical thing that, they probably have invested a lot of time in.
Yeah.
That they want to then monetize that magic sauce all over the store.
Yeah.
And that's the arrogance that leads to a lot of problems. Because now you're trying to compete in like beef.
Yeah.
With an imitation beef. Then you're over here trying to compete in chicken nuggets with an imitation chicken nugget. These categories are totally different. The usage occasions are different. The audiences are different. How people look at those things are different. And so when you start to think that your brand is this, I don't know, platform to glory and that you could just make it appear in all sorts of places because of a key ingredient or whatever, unfortunately, the brand actually, it becomes diluted and it becomes meaningless. But what's really going on scientifically is that your consumer base is getting fragmented into little niches.
Yeah.
And they don't share the same opinion of your brand.
Right.
So then when you try to do marketing, what are you going to do? You have to do what they call brand marketing.
Yeah.
Which is really the provenance of established, mature businesses.
Yeah.
Brand marketing at the highest level doesn't have the space to get down and make a user experience level argument why this is cool.
Yeah.
Because the minute you do that, you're now inside a category, right? So you can't make that argument over here in plant-based meatballs and then go do it for chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
So basically your marketer's been screwed. That's a job you don't want. Because you've been set up to fail, no matter what your budget is.
Yeah.
So the challenge is keeping focus on a core category and a core set of UPCs or stock keeping units and just fine tuning those with feedback and then driving that forward and investing in awareness building for the thing that you have put all this time into. I do meet founders, Shrestha, who they see the velocities hit a wall with SKUs 1 through 5, and then because they get bad advice, and they don't want to confront the problem, they just add SKUs 6 through 9 in another category, and then 10 through 12, and then 30. It happens all the time.
brand sort of reinvent themselves if they have kind of screwed up in many ways, like the
How do
design?
they pivot? Yeah, I think first of all, you got to get that fan research to have some clarity on what variables we want to change. And then you will have to make some intuitive guess on what you're going to change because the consumer can only tell you what they're experiencing. They can't actually say, now, if I ran your business,
Yeah.
in America, they will answer that question if you're dumb enough to ask. We will pretend we're running your company if you let us because we're disrespectful. But you don't ask that question because they can't possibly, that's unfair.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to have to figure out what the solution is.
Yeah.
But they can tell you, oh, well, I don't buy this because it's gluten free, even though it's in big red letters on the packet. It's like, okay, then why do you? Oh, well, I buy it because um, it is, high protein,
Yeah.
or it's the only cookie I can eat and I don't overeat it.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Mm.
ooh, now that's interesting. you know, that's like, So, tell me more, right?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of exploration that can lead to either a package redesign, not always, but it could lead to a much better PR and consumer marketing program with better messaging. Um, it could lead your sampling team who's sampling in stores to be talking about better, more relevant things.
So true.
But to me, I define relevance as what does the repeat purchasing fan? How do they define your brand? And then essentially copy and paste that and feed it right back to the universe and find more of those people. That's the cheapest, most efficient way to grow a CPG brand.
Yeah.
But you do, like you said, you do have to be humble enough to say, we didn't get this perfectly right.
Yeah.
So I tell people if your velocities are stagnant, but not declining, or even if they're both, you've got to look at your product first. You have to, you just, you have to put aside the fact that you spent all this money on inventory.
Yeah.
And that's where they get it hung. It's the sunk cost fallacy that psychologists talk about. Like, well, I spent $100,000 on inventory, so it has to be right.
Yeah. We just get
No, it doesn't.
fixated on that.
Nope. Oh, I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but it's that's the challenge is you have to get over
Yeah.
that psychological barrier in order to be open to the fan feedback.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you could call up 8 fans and just not listen to them.
Yeah.
If you're just listening for confirmation. So.
Yeah. We can't wrap up this conversation without talking about the skate ramp model that you described. And it's about setting feasible growth expectations among CPG brands. And what does it imply further? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, this is one of the things that came out of my big overfunded corporate projects before I set up this company and wrote the book. And what we discovered was that most of the brands that were getting to scale were not actually just buying a massive amount of national distribution.
Yeah.
They were actually growing their distribution pretty carefully because they didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? And they're adding it, but every time they added distribution, their velocity would actually keep growing. I won't get into the technical math, but there's specific technical math used in cash register scanner databases that allows you to look at shelf movement in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And when you pick the right ones, you can pressure test your business. And what happens is a skate ramp is about adding distribution at a much slower proportional rate per year than growing your velocity. So you are growing your velocity 50 to 100% year over year. You might only grow your distribution at a 10% rate or lower.
Yeah.
This is total insanity to someone trained at Pepsi or Procter & Gamble. Like they go to 95% of total distribution in 8 weeks at Pepsi and Frito-Lay. Then they turn on 20 million in ads. That's basically, and if you don't have that money, you just do the distribution. It's like, this is why I wrote the book, is because what we realized is the entrepreneurs that were succeeding were consciously or unconsciously, they were just laser focused on making sure the velocity just kept growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And I think until people get inside the math, and I constantly surprise my clients because they come in and they're kind of like, man, I don't think we can grow the velocity anymore. And then I go show them the velocity of the market leader,
Yeah.
at Oreo. And I'm like, well, that's how much they're selling every 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's like, and you're way down here.
Yeah.
So don't tell me there's not upside. Right. And the difference between the tiny number you have and the Oreo velocity number is brand power.
Yeah.
That's brand building. And that's when the marketing team asks for more money, because unfortunately,
Yeah.
it takes staff, even if you're just going to do like a time dependent promotional toolkit like field marketing or events. So you're just going to throw labor and time. It's expensive, right? So you do have to. So I think it's about you're taking money that you would have used to just buy distribution.
Oh yeah.
In the United States, and instead you put that into awareness building fans, sampling, and that's very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
At least in mature markets, it's a counterintuitive way to build a business.
Yeah.
Because it's heavily faith-based. It's very religious.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I go sign up a new chain, it's like I got my PO, purchase order, and I mean, it's all rational. My money's coming in. It's all very clear. It's all very binary. You start saying, I want to not add a lot of stores, and then I want to double the business by just doubling the velocity.
Yeah.
That terrifies a lot of people, because they're like, well, now I have to actually believe in the brand. I actually have to get out there and like hawk it. To me, it's the ultimate test. That, are you doing this because you read Entrepreneur Magazine too many times? Or do you really believe in your thing?
Yeah. It's all about the deep work.
It's just like, and in the US, there's definitely a lot of quasi founders. I don't know about India, but there's definitely a ton of them here.
Yeah.
Well, because it's turned into this internet badge.
Yeah.
Like social
sort of
status.
Easy to do thing.
It's very statusy to say I'm a founder. It's like, and I've said this in public, I would never tell anyone to become an entrepreneur. Like, I have never said that. I have never responded to that kind of question, said, yeah. Because I mean, I would have to be your sibling to know if you could handle it. Oh, it's tough. So yeah, that skate rant was based on uncovering some mathematics, hidden math, and it happened to be the inversion of how big brands launch businesses.
Interesting.
So it's like, maybe we should write a book about that.
Thank you so much, James, for joining us. It was such a great at-length conversation with you. Totally enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners are also going to see the same.
Thank you, Shrestha, for having me on.
We've come to the end of the episode. If you loved what you just listened to, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back next Monday with a really awesome guest. Stay tuned until then.